Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started. And the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. My guest today is Jackie Lynch, and she's a registered nutritional therapist who's written a very interesting book called The Happy Menopause. It's specifically about how nutrition can help us flourish. And as you might imagine, I just love the title, Happy Menopause. So welcome, Jackie, to my podcast. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I'm a big fan of this podcast.
Oh, that's so good to hear. Thank you. I just love the title, Happy Menopause. As I mentioned before we hit record, you know, I'm in the same boat as you. I want to rebrand menopause. I want to, reposition it as not being this terrible, awful thing to be endured, but that, it can be a lot more than that. And you actually start your book talking about how menopause is a transformational time in a woman's life in a good way. So why is that?
Well, I think it's because all those reproductive hormones that have been essentially driving us, our emotions, our motivations, everything since puberty, because we are hardwired to nurture, essentially, they start to drop. And with that comes space, comes headspace, so that you've suddenly got time to start thinking about what you really want to do with your life, think about different choices. Maybe, and this is what happens with a lot of women, they start to question things. Am I in the right job? Am I in the right relationship? Where am I going with my life? And so I like to think of the menopause not as something where the door is closing and you think, well, that's the end of my reproductive years and it's all downhill from now on, but actually the door opening to this whole new you where you can go and do some amazing things because you've got the time and the space and the energy, frankly, both mental and physical, to go and do that.
I know. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I just see it as doors opening. That's a great way of looking at it. And I've often heard estrogen referred to as the biddable hormone. I kind of feel that it's the hormone that keeps us in our place, isn't it? And I know a lot of women, they get alarmed by their anger when menopause comes along. And I actually think it's like the veil has been lifted, that biddable hormone has gone, and we may have always felt angry, but we didn't actually experience it and feel it and flow through it because we had the hormones to keep us biddable. What do you reckon to that?
Yeah, I think there's something in that, because I do think that whole nurturing thing really is a big deal. And I don't just mean in relation to children, because, not every woman has children. I don't have children. But I, nonetheless, throughout the years have found myself, looking after this person, reaching out, supporting friends, really caring for my job, caring for my parents, doing all these things because that's what women do. And so, although I never sort of felt driven in any particular direction, it was almost just innate, really. And of course, when you think about it in those terms, it's actually probably the hormones doing that because, women are very nurturing.
It is what we do, isn't it? Yeah. And we can still do that post-menopause, but I think, as you say, things shift and we can start to think more about ourselves as well, can't we?
Yeah.
So why do you think that some women suffer badly through menopause and some don't?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. I think there are sort of a few factors going on there. I think, first of all, it's really important to recognise that most women don't suffer badly. It's probably about 20% who do. Well, that's one of the reasons I called it the happy menopause, because I was starting to get a bit tired of all the sort of horror headlines about, celebrities going through doom and gloom. And I was just thinking, God, these poor women are going to be looking and thinking, oh my God, is that what's waiting for me?
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, no, it really genuinely isn't. Then there's about the 20% who sail through it and wonder what all the fuss is about. And then there's sort of most of us in the middle, the remaining percentage, whatever that is, 60, I think, that are, have issues some of the time, not all the time, varying degrees of symptoms and severity. And some of that will be hereditary. Sometimes it's worth having a chat to your mum to know sort of what her menopause was like. Turns out mine was very similar to my mum's, but my sister's not at all. So it will vary. But I think, as a nutritional therapist, inevitably, I see the huge impact that diet and lifestyle has. And the reason I really wanted to put the book out there was to give women the information that there are ways of managing things, and that what you're doing in your early 40s, you're laying down the groundwork for your health through menopause, and it can make a material difference to, the severity and the length of your symptoms.
And I also happen to think, I don't know what you think about this, but I think that the degree of severity that we have as we go through menopause can also be dictated by how we've lived our life in the past. And I think there's an element that, health can catch up with us, all these things that we could do in our past. The body doesn't want to do it anymore. And actually it tells us, and I, as you say, I see celebrities who've had a really difficult situation and difficult time with it. And sometimes that can be presented as the norm. And as you say, it's not the norm. And then if you look at the way that person may have lived their life, they may have, been burning the candle at, 60 ends all at the same time.
Yeah.
So actually the body's just going, can't do this anymore.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I think, in our 20s, we're relatively indestructible, and suddenly around age 29, it's like a switch is flicked and you can't quite be as fresh as a daisy after an all-nighter and all those other things. But I think the big thing for women is the stress, the impact of stress. Our generation are, I think, well, we're the sandwich generation, aren't we? But I think beyond that being sandwiched between looking after elderly parents and looking after children, there's also the sense that, we're the first crew to sort of really come through and try and shine in the workplace while, quote, having it all. And I think looking back, most women will probably think, I couldn't have it all. I tried to, and it looked like I did, perhaps, but at what cost? And the cost is going to be yourself. Because I work with women in my clinic, and they are just ground down. They've driven themselves so hard to be, the perfect executive woman, the perfect mother, running around, trying to get the cupcakes ready for school while they've got a workshop or a presentation to get ready for the board or whatever they're doing. So I think that, while we're hardwired to nurture, the one person we don't nurture is ourselves. And I think that's where it really needs to come in for menopause. So I think, yes, stuff can catch up with you. And if you've been driving yourself incredibly hard, then it's going to drag you down. And it's particularly going to affect your body's ability to manage stress, your resilience. And if you've got a lack of resilience by the time you come into menopause, then the body's backup plan for estrogen simply can't kick in.
I think that's massively important. I mean, I've said on this podcast before, I don't know if you've heard it, but, I am convinced that stress caused my early menopause at 41, because I'd crossed countries, I'd got divorced, I was a single parent, I was an executive, I had an au pair, thank goodness, but I had to earn the money to have the au pair and to pay the mortgage because it was just me.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that, in fact, it happened when I actually left work and went freelance. I was in a new, good relationship. But then it was like going on holiday and my body just went, can't do it, just collapsed on me. And but it was very, very interesting. And that's why I love what you talk about in the book. And we'll get onto it in a moment. Because I went to see a nutritionist. And I was advised absolutely to work on getting my blood sugar levels consistent during the day. And I knew nothing about this. I was also given a tincture with things like Agnus castus in it, and I don't know what else was in it. But the main thing was getting my diet sorted and stripping out anything that was bad, and being consistent with the blood sugar levels. And then I got my periods back. So
Wow.
that was just incredible for me. And I got them back for about 9 months. It didn't carry on. And probably it may well have been because I didn't keep up the regime I was supposed to be keeping up, that they didn't continue. My body went back to what it was planning to do, I suppose. But if I had been consistent, who knows, I might have carried on having periods for more years. But that really showed me how much control we actually have over our hormonal balance. And I know that you have a chapter in the book where you said, if there's one thing to do, please do this, read this section. And that is about maintaining our blood sugar levels, isn't it? So
yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell us, why is that important?
Okay, well, it's really important because I touched on the body's backup plan there. Now, basically, as the ovaries stop producing estrogen and that production declines, our adrenal glands take over that job. So we weren't just left hanging. So, okay, bye-bye estrogen, and now you're going to have a rubbish time for the rest of your life. There was a plan. The body's a really high performance machine, and it's got a plan there.
Brilliant.
The problem is the adrenal glands also produce our stress response. And because the stress hormones, our fight or flight response generated by cortisol and adrenaline is essentially life-saving, of course the body will prioritize that because it will save us. So that what will happen then, if you're in a constant state of chronic stress, is that instead of producing those small amounts of estrogen post-menopause to keep things on track, your body's just too busy producing the stress hormones. So what we need to do then is look at how nutrition can make a big difference to that. And the sort of nutrition 101 when it comes to stress management is blood sugar, because basically every time your blood sugar crashes, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline, because it's dangerous for us not to have enough sugar in the blood. It's our primary source of energy. But of course, what will happen when your blood sugar crashes, out comes the stress hormones. They want to redress the balance. They will then drive cravings for sugary food, refined carbohydrate, possibly some form of stimulant like a cup of coffee or a glass of wine. It can depend on the time of day as to what you might crave. The end result will be that you'll stuff something in, and instead of going back to where your blood sugar should be in that nice level band, it'll spike. And then, of course, we've got another mechanism to deal with that. Insulin comes out. Insulin will then scoop up all that excess sugar, send it off to the liver to be stored. If there's too much of it, it'll store the rest as fat cells. So, every time your blood sugar's going up, you're encouraging your body to lay down fat stores. And, weight management is an issue for an awful lot of women in midlife. So I just throw that in there as an extra tip. But that's why blood sugar balance is so important, because essentially, if you can keep the blood sugar nice and stable, you're not going to be producing more stress hormones. I can't remove the stress from your life. Only you, for the most part, can do that. But you can at least make your body more stronger, more resilient, and make sure you're not producing stress hormones needlessly.
So simple and yet so clever.
Yeah.
I think it's remarkable. And as I said, I have personal experience of what happened. So I know how important this is. You also say that there's no one size fits all approach when it comes to, managing everything within your book. So why is that? Why can we not just all say, well, I'll manage my blood sugar level and I'll do this and I'll do that and I'll do that and I'll be fine? Because I think a lot of people, HRT does that for them, doesn't it? It to a certain extent, it kind of covers all the bases. But if we're trying to take a more natural approach, it's potentially a little more complicated.
It is more complicated, basically, because no two women have the same menopause. Some women have the severe hot flushes and night sweats. Others find that they're struggling more with cognitive or emotional, psychological issues like anxiety, loss of confidence, low mood, or the rage that you mentioned earlier. Or it might be the headaches, the fatigue, the weight management. There's lots of stuff that can happen. The symptoms are many and varied. I always think getting blood sugar balance right is absolutely the first thing to do, because that is the sort of underlying thing that will then at least make sure you're not producing excess stress hormones. But of course, if there's other external factors out there that are affecting you, then, blood sugar balance is only one part of the picture. So you would need to start looking at how you're managing your time, what the principal sources of stress in your life are, and what you can actually do about stepping back from them and perhaps not putting yourself under so much pressure. But then with all these different symptoms, there are different things you can do, because addressing issues like aching joints or headaches is going to be a different pathway in the body compared to addressing something like anxiety or hot flushes. So that's why after my If You Only Do One Thing chapter, I just go into, it's a little bit like an encyclopedia of menopause symptoms, and you can just go to the one you want and then apply a targeted approach. Because it's worth remembering, we blame a lot on the menopause, but maybe you're getting your headaches for a different reason.
I know. I absolutely agree with you on that. We blame menopause for everything. It's a bit like Ashton Applewhite. I always like to quote her when she talks about, people blame age for their aches and pains. And she'll say, well, if it's age, why is only my right knee hurting and not my left knee as well? Because they're the same age. And in the same way, we just say menopause, and we know there are all these dreadful, awful symptoms. And it might be that. And as you say, the weight gain, yes, it could be related to menopause and hormones, but it's also because our metabolism naturally goes down as we age. And if we don't, maintain our muscle mass and we continue eating the same thing and doing the same level of exercise, guess what? We're going to put on weight, aren't we? It's just going to happen. So I agree, there's many things that we blame on menopause that actually it might just be part of the aging process. It might be the way we live. It might be the environment in which we live. It could be so many different things, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it really could. I mean, it's something I mentioned in a workshop the other day was, well, let's think for a second. Headaches, fatigue, constipation, dry skin, confusion, loss of concentration. They're all classic symptoms of dehydration. So are you drinking enough? So looking at some of those other basics, really, just to make sure you've dealt with those, because a lot of the time there's other stuff going on there. I think with weight management, one of the things I see is that the loss of confidence plays a part. Perhaps you used to be, much more body confident. And so you go to the gym and you do your thing. But now suddenly you don't want to look at yourself in Lycra because you feel more self-conscious. You probably looked exactly the same as you did 2 years ago, but not to you. And that's the thing that can drive this. So then you stop going to the gym and you think, oh, well, I can't go anymore because they're all young and they look much better than me. And so it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think there are lots of factors that can come in here.
I also think the beliefs we have about menopause, what our expectations are about what it's going to be like, can also affect our experience of it.
Yeah, I think that's true of so many things, isn't it? Because if you expect the worst, you often get the worst. I think it's just having that positive outlook, because you can look at it and think, oh goodness me, the children have left home, I've got empty nest, what's left for me, I'm tired, I don't look as good. You can talk yourself into all of this, or you can think, wow, it's not that I'm not going to stop worrying about them, because mothers never stop worrying about their children, but you don't have the same sort of day in, day out stuff you've got to do for them and taking them everywhere and feeding them and looking after them. So maybe that's the time for you to try something new and take up a new hobby or learn a new skill. So I think it's about, in the nicest possible way, taking yourself in hand a bit and just thinking, let's think, what can I do to make this better for me, rather than just feeling passively, oh, it's going to be rubbish because I've read all these articles about how awful it is, because it doesn't have to be that way.
And then I could get on my hobby horse about, there's an awful lot of misogyny out there, which has led us to believe that, menopause is the end of meaningful life, as you said at the beginning, and that, as infertile women, we don't have a relevant role, etc., etc. And sometimes, we buy into that. I know I did when I went through the early menopause. I thought, I was a washed up old prune, and it took me a while to realize, no, I wasn't. I was just, being ageist towards myself. you know?
Yeah. Well, I think you see that a lot, don't you? You know, you see all these sort of grey-haired fat men in suits on TV, and they have no trouble getting jobs, whether it be acting jobs, presenting jobs, whatever. And yet, you know, the minute a woman has a grey hair or a wrinkle, suddenly a newer version is wheeled in for the presenter of that particular program. You know, we've all seen it. So I think it becomes sort of slightly ingrained. But if you think of it from another perspective and sort of think about, you know, sort of tribal, ancient tribes and so on, you know, the older women were the wise women of the village. You know, we knew stuff. Everyone came to us, looked up to us, and that's how it should still be now. And I think it's important for us to realize what value we can bring.
And I think it's all about us stepping into that, isn't it? But actually, as you said right at the beginning, stepping into that possibility of transformation, and that this is a natural third stage in our lives, I suppose, if we go, you know, before puberty and then between puberty and menopause, that this is a completely natural third stage for us, where we can have a different role in society and life and everything else, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's time for more new and exciting things, not just, oh, well, that's it and it's all downhill from here.
So what are I know there's one thing that I absolutely swear by to keep my hormones in check. But before I tell you that, and I'm sure you probably guess what it is, but what sort of things do you recommend nutritionally for women to be including?
Well, I think probably one of the bigger ones, and that's a sort of absolute nutrition basic, is to be eating more protein, because most women are terrible at eating enough protein. And we need protein for lots of different things, because first of all, it balances blood sugar, because it slows down the release of carbohydrate into the body, keeps you going for longer. So that's one of the reasons why, you know, when you read some of these weird crash diets, there's a lot of protein going on there, because it can help to reduce sugar cravings. But it also has masses of other roles. I mean, we're literally made of protein. Every cell in the body is made of protein. So, you know, when we're going through this process and you start to worry about, you know, your skin, your hair, your nails, well, having enough protein is going to keep them strong and not have them splitting and thinning and all those things that can happen. We need protein for strong bones, and most women know that you've got to be thinking about your bone health once you're through and beyond menopause. But we also need the amino acids found in protein for the production of neurotransmitters that govern things like mood, memory, concentration, and motivation. And, you know, again, issues in those areas are very common for women in midlife. So one of the things I say absolutely is eat protein with every meal and snack. And when I say protein, it doesn't have to be the meat and the fish. If you're thinking, oh, I don't want to be eating meat all the time. You know, nuts and seeds are a great source of protein. That can beef up your breakfast. You've got things like soya, quinoa, all the pulses like beans and lentils, hummus, chickpeas. So there's lots of ways of factoring those into your diet much more regularly. You know, men are great at getting enough protein. They seem sort of to have it ingrained in them. Oh, you need their protein because it keeps them strong. Well, it keeps us strong too. And we have every right to be as strong as men, not just thinking, oh, well, you know, I have a little bit of toast for breakfast and some green leaves for lunch because I'm on a diet, and then I'll have my chicken in the evening. It's not enough, particularly not at this time of hormonal change. So I think protein's a big one, I'd say. And then I suppose if I had to narrow it down, I'd say leafy green vegetables, because that's a massive one-stop shop for menopause-friendly nutrients. So by leafy greens, I'm thinking things like, you know, spinach, rocket, watercress, cabbage, and at a push, I know it's not very leafy, but broccoli, because it's so brilliant for you. And the reason for that is that they're a fabulous source of magnesium, which is my all-round favourite mineral. And magnesium calms the nervous system, makes you more resilient, regulates the body's response to stress so that you're better equipped to deal with the challenges of daily life. So back to that sort of managing the adrenals and supporting them. But it also helps with tired, aching muscles, that twitchy eyelid, classic sign of magnesium deficiency. You need magnesium for the absorption of calcium, which we know we need for strong bones. Oh, and by the way, leafy greens are also a surprisingly good source of calcium, probably containing about twice as much per 100 grams as milk. And then they contain iron, great for any perimenopausal women who perhaps are having flooding and starting to, you know, have iron depletion. So I think a couple of handfuls of leafy greens every day and lots of protein would be a great way to start.
Yeah, that sounds. I hadn't realized actually, and I know an awful lot, but I hadn't thought about, the need to have more protein. I do, and I often have lots of nuts and seeds. And see, what I was going to say was the phytoestrogens, because you
Ah,
write about the phytoestrogens, don't you? And I am a huge fan of flaxseed. I have it every single day, and I have soy, so the soy, I guess, does double duty, doesn't it? Because you get the protein
yeah.
and you get the phytoestrogens as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you put me on the spot, and I can't sort of name everything, but phytoestrogens are great. I mean, they're plant compounds essentially that mimic the action of estrogen in the body. So things like, I mean, there are sort of two main sources. You've got the isoflavones, which you'll find in soya. And I'm a particular fan of the original fermented form of soya, or the whole bean, like edamame. So we'll be thinking about things like fermented tofu, tempeh, natto, or miso, for example. And studies have shown that women in Asian countries tend to have much fewer incidences of hot flushes in particular, and it is felt that it's associated with the higher levels of the isoflavones naturally in their diet. And then, of course, the biggest source of lignans, which is the other big phytoestrogen in the Western diet, is flaxseed. And flaxseed, it's a quadruple whammy. Flaxseed with your breakfast, because it's protein, it's fiber. So straight away, that combo that you've got for blood sugar balance is packed with omega-3. And we all know we need it, even if we're not quite sure why. I mean, mainly we need it for a ton of things. It's great for hormone balance. It's great for heart health, brain health, skin, hair, all of those things. So it's a real all-rounder. And then, of course, you've got the phytoestrogens in there. So that's 4 great reasons to be adding flaxseed to your breakfast.
Yeah, I love it. And I have it with sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds. So I'm a big seed eater.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear.
But I think it's interesting how in other cultures they eat a lot of these things, don't they? And I reckon there's probably a correlation between them not having such a bad menopause experience and the fact that they have all of these things in their diet. Whether it be sesame seeds or pumpkin seeds or sunflower or flax or soy or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've allowed ourselves to get suckered into having quite a processed diet, and the combination of processed foods and lots of stress and then all the other things we stuff ourselves with, like alcohol and caffeine, just sort of all combine together to put the body under a lot of physiological stress. And so it comes back round to stress again, because stress comes in many guises. It's not just having a rubbish day at work. It can affect you as psychological stress, emotional stress, and then the physiological stress within the body.
So why can't we all just go to the doctor and get some HRT?
Well, I mean, you can if you want to. I think what's really important, though, is that women actually understand what HRT is, what the hormone replacement therapy is. They understand the associated risks. They understand the associated benefits, because it's about weighing that up. You need to look at your medical history, your family history, the severity of your symptoms, and then decide if it's actually going to be right for you. And I feel really strongly that women shouldn't be sort of entrenched in either one camp or the other and think, well, it's HRT or nothing, or it's nutrition or nothing. I think you should look at everything, understand everything, ask questions about everything, and then decide, what's right for you. Now, it wasn't right for me. I didn't want to take HRT, and the diet and lifestyle route is working really well for me. But some women who have, particularly severe symptoms, particularly some of the emotional, the depression, the severe anxiety, may well find that they benefit from some extra progesterone, in fact. So it's all about knowing what the right thing is. But I think what's super important to realize is that HRT is not the quick fix. It is not just gonna work. You still have to have the right diet and lifestyle for it to work effectively. It's not just, oh, well, that's my quick solution and forget about the protein in the leafy greens because I don't like spinach anyway. It's not that simple.
And I've come across women who I am absolutely convinced they kind of see the HRT as their get out of jail card. So they'll keep eating all the processed food and they won't tackle, excess weight, which I know can exacerbate symptoms, and they'll drink like a fish.
Yeah.
But they'll take the HRT. But I guess what they're doing then is they're not addressing the underlying issues, are they? It's like, I think it's like putting a Band-Aid on, that it's masking it, but it's not really letting the air get to it so it can breathe and the cut can heal.
I think there's a lot to that. And I think that it's just sort of really important to realize that you need to find a way of being your best version of yourself as you move through midlife and beyond, because, we don't just want to live longer, we want to live healthier and better, because there's no point in living long and not being able to do anything you want to do. So I think, considering diet and lifestyle and how it can support you is really important. And, HRT on its own plus a bad diet can help a bit, but I can guarantee you'll feel way better if you do HRT in a really good diet, or you just do a really good diet, depending on where your decisions lie. But HRT plus a bad diet doesn't make you feel great.
Well, that's what I was able to do. You see, I went on HRT for the early menopause, and I was told I needed to be on it till normal menopause age of 51. So I did that, but I didn't want to do it at the beginning. I really didn't want to do it. And then everybody said, early menopause, you got to go on it, you got to protect the bones and heart, etc., etc. I'm not sure I'm convinced of that now, but I know that is still very much the advice. But I always saw an end point.
Yeah.
I'd been told, stay on it till 51, then see how you are. Now, I got to 51, I was all right, but I had put in place, exactly as you say, a much better diet. I had incorporated the natural phytoestrogens. I was, working to keep my blood sugar as level as possible, because I had that experience from before. And I was able to wean myself off. And I had no negative side effects whatsoever by weaning myself off, because I've put in place everything else. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really nice to hear that, because it's like textbook, and that's, it's really nice to hear.
Well, that's why I know this, because this is exactly what happened to me with getting the periods back at the beginning and then weaning myself off when I came off the HRT. So I was my own guinea pig, I suppose. I could see what my body was doing. Very powerful, I think. I just, we have so much more control than I think we do.
We absolutely do. And I am constantly blown away by the power of nutrition. I studied it for 4 years. I've been practicing as a clinician for 10 years, but I am still blown away by sometimes how a very small change can make the most enormous difference to someone. And it's so exciting when it happens.
Yeah, it's remarkable, isn't it? It really is quite remarkable. So I know you had your own sort of career change, didn't you? Because you used to do something completely different, and presumably you started learning about nutrition and decided you wanted to learn more. How did that come about?
Oh, well, it was a bit of a light bulb moment, really. My original degree was French, and I went and lived in France as soon as I graduated and stayed there for 13 years. So I moved into sales and marketing for intellectual property, so TV and film rights, publishing, merchandising around those literary properties. Great fun, lots of traveling, became a very big executive job, earned lots of money, all those things that you really enjoy doing in your 20s and 30s, and then suddenly think, oh, is this how it's going to be for the next 20 years? So I was getting a bit restless, much as I had loved it, and I couldn't quite think where I would be going next. I thought maybe I'll just move into a different area and sell something else, but I couldn't quite see what, because books have always been my first love anyway, apart from food, and wasn't I lucky to land on that as the next career. And I went on a spa holiday, and it was a company called InSpa, and they block book gorgeous places in fantastic bijou hotels. And they fly out their own nutritionist and their own chef and yoga teacher and masseuse and all of that. And I wasn't ill. I do have quite a strong constitution, but I was very tired and stressed. And I couldn't believe, about sort of 4 or 5 days in, I just felt completely different. It was alcohol and caffeine free. And although I hadn't read the small print, I soon realized it was wheat and dairy free. But I didn't actually notice till about the Wednesday, because the food was so amazing. It was all great. And I just couldn't believe how much better I felt. after that. So I started practicing much more carefully about my diet over that year. And then the next year I went back and did another one in a different place. And I remember sort of looking after that holiday, looking at the biogs of the various people on there, including the nutritionists, and they'd all seemed to have done the same course at somewhere called the Institute for Optimum Nutrition. And so I Googled it and I read the course description, and it was just one of those light bulb moments. And I thought, that is what I'm doing next. I want to be the nutritionist on an in-spa holiday because it seemed like a great way to spend time. So it all happened very quickly. I think that holiday was in the April. By the June, I'd spoken to my boss and I had handed my notice in. I'd been accepted on the course. And that September, I walked into my first chemistry class, which I was terrified about, let me tell you. But yeah, it went from there.
Wow, that's excellent. And it took you 4 years, is that right? 4 years of studying?
Yes, I had to do a foundation year the first year because I had given up science at school as early as I could. I'd always been sort of arts and languages. And so I had to do a year of chemistry, biology and anatomy and physiology to bring me up to first year degree level, essentially, and to be able to start the course. I was frankly terrified because I just thought, I'm going to be so rubbish at this. And I just remember being amazed at how different it is learning things as an adult, how you focus better, but also you have that confidence to just, if you don't understand it, not just sit there and think, oh, well, I'm too embarrassed to ask. I just asked, and then I asked again, and then I asked again because I still didn't understand how to balance an equation. And then suddenly it all became clear, and I realized balancing equations was a thing of beauty. And a bit like doing a cryptic crossword, the satisfaction, the minute you get it right, you know exactly that it's right. You don't need to check the answer. So yeah, it was that foundation year, and then into nutrition proper from there.
Fantastic. How exciting. I like that. It's a very good story. So what is your very best advice for women, if there are women listening to this who are really struggling with perimenopause and just don't know what to turn? Obviously, they should go and get your book.
Well, clearly. But I think my absolute top best advice is actually slightly general, and it is be kind to yourself, because this is an enormous time of hormonal turmoil. And in the same way as, you know, if you have children or nieces and nephews or godchildren, you'll be looking at them and supporting them as through puberty and making sure they eat well and sleep well, and that they've, they're getting fresh air and they're not overdoing it. And you do all these things because you know, adolescence, it's a big transition. They need to be well. Well, this is our big transition. And let me tell you, it can last a lot longer than adolescence does. And you really need to think much more carefully about yourself, because by and large, even if your kids are still at home, they're bigger. They're not going to be tots for the most part, unless you're having a very early menopause. So yeah, they'll survive. They'll survive if you take a bit of time for yourself. So start to think about how you can eat better. Don't just always think about, well, what do they like? And then just, oh, well, you'll eat that as well because you're too tired to make something else. Start to think about what would be the right food for you. And if that's the leafy greens, well, it won't do them any harm to have a few leafy greens as well. Taking time for yourself, managing your schedule so you're not over-promising at work, or trying to sort of fit in everything while you're driving everybody to wherever they need to go and doing all those things. Take time for exercise. At the weekends, take, an hour a day for me time, whether that's lying on the bed reading a magazine or, going for a country walk or playing a piano. But it's something that is for you and not just, oh, this will be my me time because all the family will like it. Blow the rest of the family. This is about you. And I think by being kind to yourself, the nutrition will become a part of that. Because I've already given you lots of great tips there, so you don't need more, other than if you buy my book naturally. But no, I think just start to think about how you can genuinely nurture yourself. And if it doesn't come naturally because you're so used to doing it for everyone else, think of it this way. If you collapse, then everything else is going to fall apart. So if you can't do it for yourself, do it for the rest of them. Because, if you're not there to look after them, then it's all going to collapse anyway, isn't it? So I think really be kind to yourself and take that time to look after yourself.
thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, share it, and leave me a review wherever you're listening. It really helps me get the message out. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you'll find strategies, support, and resources to help make your midlife magnificent. Get clarity on how to make the most of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.